Hello guys, in this video let's understand NSG and we will try to understand it with an example of housing society. So NSG, it means Network Security Group. So these are set of security rules. Now in this video we will try NSG practically in Azure portal, and guys remember that we can attach NSG to network interface of VM or to a subnet. And so guys, what is this network interface? Obviously we are going to see it in this video. Now discussing more about NSG. So NSG, it decides who can connect to a subnet and who cannot. So basically these are inbound rules, and NSG also decides who can leave the subnet. So these are outbound rules. Okay, so for example, if we have a VM in subnet, we can restrict access to that VM using NSG. Now guys, if you see this diagram, on the left hand side we have this housing society, that is this red box, and it has this wall compound. So consider this border as a wall compound. So in the same way, on the right hand side we have this VNet. So again this red box is VNet, and firewall provides the security to this VNet. So again consider this red border as a firewall. Now in this housing society we have buildings. So again this green box, it is a building, and each of the building contains apartments or flats, and we want to secure an access to these apartments or flats, right? So similarly on the right hand side we have this green box, so that is subnet, and within that we have a VM, and let's assume there is a web app hosted in this VM, and now we want to secure an access to this VM or to this web app, right? So in this housing society we can have a separate watchman for each of the buildings. So let's say this is a watchman for this building and this is a watchman for this building, and this watchman, he has been instructed about who can enter this building and who cannot. So again you can see this is a separate watchman for this building, this is a separate watchman for this building. So similarly for subnet we can have something called NSG, and this NSG, it will contain rules, and these rules, they decide who can connect to this subnet and who cannot. So who can connect means which request can enter this subnet. So let's say this is a request coming from public internet. So to decide whether this request is allowed to connect to this subnet or not, we have NSG. Okay, but then guys, how exactly we can define that whether request is allowed to connect to that subnet or not? So for that again we have security rule, and each security rule, it has 5 components. So first, source, that is who is trying to enter subnet, then source port, then destination. So again in this case destination will be subnet, then destination port, and fifth is protocol. So protocol like TCP or HTTP. And now let's actually try NSG practically. So if you remember, we have a VM, and as of now anybody can RDP to this VM using public IP. So we will restrict that only Harshal's IP should be able to RDP to this VM. Actually that is also not the best of solutions. So ideally we should use Bastion, but then we will see Bastion in our upcoming videos. And then we also have a web app which is hosted in this VM. So we cannot access this web app using the public IP of this VM. So for example, so guys, we are in this VM, and if you see, this is the web app which is hosted in this VM. So from within this VM I am able to access this web app but using localhost. But if I try to access this web app using a public IP address of this VM, I cannot. So let's fix both of these two issues using NSG. So guys, we are in Azure portal, and let's open our VM, and now let's click on this networking, and let's click on network settings. Now guys, the first thing, observe this network interface. So it is VM for web app 545. So that is the network interface which is attached to this VM. So we also call it NIC. Okay, so basically when we want to apply any NSG, so either we can apply NSG to this network interface, or to the subnet within which this VM is residing. Okay, now let's go down, and guys, if you see, it says network security group, and this is the network security group, that is VM for web app -NSG. And you see this network security group, so again it is set of security rules, and it is attached to this network interface, that is NIC. And at the bottom you can see these are the security rules within this network security group, that is NSG. Okay, now let's do one thing. Let's add a rule so that nobody should be able to RDP to this VM. Okay, so please follow my mouse. Let's click on this create port rule, and let's click on this inbound port rule. So we are adding an inbound rule to this NSG. So let's select source as any, source port star, that is any, destinations any. Now under service, let's select RDP, right? And now let's go down and let's select this action, that is deny. So that means, so any source or anybody, when he is trying to RDP to this VM, he should be denied. Okay, and guys, this is important thing, priority. So as of now, just remember that lower this number, higher is the priority. Okay, and we'll understand priority in a few minutes, but as of now, again, just remember, lower this number, higher is the priority. So as of now, I will just say it 150, and you see name is automatically provided to us, that is deny any RDP inbound, and let's say add. Now we may need to wait for a couple of minutes for this rule to take effect, so let's wait. Okay guys, so we have waited for a few minutes, and now let's try to remotely connect to this VM, and now we expect it should not be allowed. Okay, so let's try to connect, and you see it's already taking more time. Yes, it's not working, so let's close this. And now we are back in network settings of this VM, but now we want to make sure that Harshal's IP should be allowed, right? So again, let's go to this create port rule, and let's click on this inbound rule. And in order to allow Harshal's IP address, let's find out the IP address of Harshal. So I am searching what is my IP address over here in the browser, and let's open this, and let's copy this IP address. And we are back in adding this rule. So again, I will say source as IP addresses, and let's provide the IP address of Harshal's machine. Source port star, destination any, and here under service I will provide RDP, right? And let's go down, and guys, again important thing, priority. Now as you can guess, for this rule it should be higher priority, so we should provide the smaller number than this 150. So I will say 140, and action is allowed. That means RDP from Harshal's IP address should be allowed. So I will say add. So again, we may need to wait for a couple of minutes. And okay, let's try to connect. So again, we are trying to RDP, and see immediately it's working. So let's connect, and I will say okay. Yes. And you see we are back in this VM. Now guys, observe this URL. So this is the web app which is hosted in this VM, right? But again, it's not working with IP address. So the first change we should do is we should disable firewall. So let's click on this start button, and let's enter firewall. And can you see this public network? It's active. So let's click on this, and let's disable it, and let's close it. Now let's try refresh again, and you see still it's not working, and let's find out why. So we are back in Azure portal, and again we are in this VM under network settings. Let's go down, and guys, see this. I mean, there is no default, so there is no inbound rule which allows HTTP traffic over port 8080, right? So now, as you can guess, we should add a rule which should allow HTTP traffic over port 8080. So again, let's create a rule. So again, source is any, port range star, destination any, and guys, here under service we can select this HTTP. But you see, by default the port is 80 and it is disabled. But if you see, we have configured our app for port 8080, right? So instead of selecting HTTP from this service dropdown, let's select this custom, and here let's provide port number 8080, and let's go down, and priority again we can provide, let's say 120, and you see it says allow any custom 8080 inbound. That means traffic over port 8080 for this VM, it should be allowed. And now let's say add, and again for this rule to take effect we may need to wait for a couple of minutes, so let's wait. Okay, now let's go back to our VM, and here now let's try refresh, and you see immediately it's working. Now guys, let's go back to our Azure portal. Let's go down a bit. See again guys, we are under network settings, and you see this is the network security group, that is NSG, and it says it is attached to network interface, right? So we can attach this NSG to network interface as well as subnet. So let's discuss about NSG a bit more in our next video. Thank you.